Welcome to Generations at Work, where our goal is to build bridges and not walls between the different generations in the workplace. Today, we're going to explore a topic that affects every generation, and that's managing those expectations in the workplace. But before we get started, if you're interested in learning more about how to lead different generations in the workplace, perhaps you want a workshop, maybe coaching for your teams to raise the leadership lid on your organization, please visit maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. And as a value add to you, we've created a downloadable free Generations at Work playbook that you can also access again at maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. I'm your host, Susan Davis, executive facilitator and coach with Maxwell Leadership, and our generational expert, Dr. Tim Elmore, international speaker and author, over 35 best-selling titles. Tim is the expert at equipping leaders to engage young team members to move and lead into the next generation. Tim, welcome.
Susan, it's always great to be with you. And this is going to be a very fascinating topic, I think, today.
Oh, so Tim, this is expectations and accountability,
Yeah,
which we tackled on our last podcast,
yeah,
are probably two of the biggest topics I
yeah,
see when I'm working with teams. When I'm working with teams, people say, nobody's accountable, nobody's accountable.
yeah,
From that first interview experience, hiring managers are recognizing different generations bring different expectations to the table,
yeah.
and then the accountability piece. So, I want to just kind of step back and ask, why do you think we have different expectations among the different generations? And how does that differentiate in the different generations?
Yeah, great question. Well, Susan, you and I both know, and I'm sure most of the people listening would know, that hiring managers are seeing today from the moment the interview begins with that new job candidate that different generations are bringing a different level of expectations with them. For instance, an Xer or a boomer that's been around the block a few times would go, I realize what's realistic to expect here, compensation, PTO, etc. A young Gen Z member who's 22, 23, 24 years old, maybe their past years have never been in a full-time job yet. So they
Mhm.
might bring a very audacious expectation about how much money they're going to make or how much freedom they're going to enjoy, how much authority they're going to have from day one, which
Mhm.
often is earned over time with trust. So I think sometimes we just get ambushed as managers and supervisors and leaders with not remembering who's in front of us and what that might bring. So
Yeah.
Susan, one story I love telling, I think I might have mentioned it in another podcast though, but I have a friend who's an attorney who's hiring all of their staff at this firm. And he was telling me that a young lady came in dressed to the nines, came with a 4.0 GPA from a very, very elite higher ed institution. So lots of expectations on his part.
Mhm.
What he wasn't expecting was her social awareness being a touch low. So about 20 to 25 minutes into the interview, she smiled at him and said, I'm going to have your job in 18 months. Well, he was kind of taken aback, you can imagine. She obviously assumed that would be taken as confidence. And all of her professors in college loved that confidence she brought with her.
Yeah.
He saw it as cockiness, a little bit of
Mhm.
arrogance, a little bit of conceit. So I'm not saying she's wrong or he's right or vice versa, but it was completely perceived differently. And he dismissed her. The interview ended.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
not sure how much he got into why with her, but she probably was flabbergasted at why that wasn't taken as, I'm a confident young woman here. So Gen Z, just real quick to tie a ribbon around this
Yeah.
opening comment, Generation Z, the youngest team member coming onto the team, frequently brings unrealistic
Mm.
expectations about money and about personal time off and authority and so forth. And so millennials and Gen Z, we're just going to have to navigate that. And that's why we have to play, as we always say, chess instead of checkers with our
Checkers.
people. So I'll
You
stop
know,
there.
I think that is exactly what I hear from people that we coach with and we work with
Yeah.
is, they come into the job and they want my job, or they think they should be promoted in 6 months or have unlimited PTO. And is that really their fault or our fault for not setting that expectation? As leaders,
Yeah.
I think we have to do a better job at setting that expectation. I don't know. What have you found
Oh,
in
Susan, you're exactly right. In my humble opinion, you're exactly right. Um, I was speaking at an event recently, and one of the presidents of a company came up to me and said, I just got a really good book, and it's called You Raised Us, Now Work With Us. And it was basically
like it?
written by a millennial generation who said, listen, you gave us trophies, blah, 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 all of our lives growing up, and now you're frustrated with us? I don't think so. You need to work with us as we, enter adulthood, and you have to right size what we expect to happen. I thought that was brilliant.
It is.
So
It is.
I think this is a gigantic issue and maybe even larger than our listeners are realizing. Because while the expectation may be about a minor issue, expectations play a huge role as to how we feel about the day.
So, how do you
So,
think these expectations make or break that camaraderie?
well, I may have shared this on this podcast before, but one of the big principles that I bought into, and it has saved me a number of times as a leader, is this: conflict expands based on the distance between expectations and reality. Let me say that
Mm,
again.
yes.
Conflict expands the sense of conflict. We feel turmoil on the inside. We've based on the distance between what I expected to have happen and what actually happens. So everybody on this call right now can remember the last time they were sorely disappointed with somebody, right? Whether it
Mm,
was on the job between 8 and 5 or maybe in the home. But we get disappointed because we had this expectation of our spouse or our colleague or that young person we just hired. And it may be a tiny issue, like when they were supposed to be there or whatever, but it just grinds at us.
mhm,
And I'm suggesting if we don't shore up those expectations with communication, it's going to be a bad deal. So, one quick illustration. If I tell my boss that I'm going to be at the meeting or maybe at the office by 8:30 a.m. and I show up at 8:37, it's usually not a big deal. I show up at 9:15, we're going to have a conversation about that.
yeah.
And it isn't because the boss can't live without me for 45 minutes. It's because I created an expectation. I said, I'll
Mm,
be there. Or he or she said, you need to be there. So this is why we cannot underscore enough the power of communication. And as you mentioned earlier, Susan, keep talking about this, keep talking about this, keep talking
mhm,
about this. Because I'm telling you, our narratives change with
mm.
time. And what we thought we said back in March and now it's May or whatever, it's different in our heads. We have reconstructed memories and we start remembering different things along the way. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
and I think that relationship that people are developing
Yes.
with the different generations is going to be key because we know relationships are going to be the foundation to
Yeah.
being able to lead and manage through these. So let's break this down a little bit.
Okay.
What do leaders need to know about the different generations and then those expectations?
Yeah. Well, so if there are 4 or 5 generations that you're intermingling with every day, their experience they bring into the job has shaped them, has shaped their thinking. We would all
Mhm,
agree with that, okay? I've often said people develop like wet cement. The cement is very soft 15 minutes after you lay that sidewalk, but it's really hard 6 months after you. So our neural pathways are set the first 20 to 25 years, and then they kind of harden. So a Gen Zer would have a very different experience and much shorter experience than someone like you, Susan, who's been on the job for decades, or
mhm,
me, who's been on the job for what feels like centuries right now. So, listeners, check this statement out. I believe satisfying people on the job um, is pretty much about managing expectations. I think people are naturally resilient. Human beings are resilient creatures, a resilient
mhm.
species, if you will. But once they expect something or whatever, it can be a really, really difficult thing, even though that person is resilient. So just know, tell yourself this as a leader. Satisfying people is pretty much about managing expectations. Here's statement number 2. I believe we cannot get disillusioned about something unless we're first illusioned about that something. Now,
Let's
I
go
made up a
deeper.
word there,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
let's
think
go
about it.
deeper with that.
Yeah, if I bring illusions about how marvelous my boss is going to be, or about how marvelous the dining hall will be at the office or whatever, I don't know. it's easy to get disillusioned. So I
Absolutely.
think that's why from week one and really from interview one, it's so good to go over in pretty acute detail. Here's what to expect. And please tell me now, Nancy or Bob, if you can't handle this or if you this doesn't meet your requirements.
Tim, I
Um,
think this is so important because I think
yeah,
these expectations or false expectations, they lead to
yes,
disappointments, right?
yes,
And when
it's
we're
true.
disappointed, we become disengaged.
Yeah,
And when we become disengaged, we're less productive and
yep,
then they leave.
yeah.
So I
It
think
often
that's real
leads.
important, real important.
Yeah, it is. And this is really behavioral science. This is psychology right now. And I know some of you listening go, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a CEO. Well, believe it or not, leadership has a lot to do with psychology and behavioral science. So it's really knowing that today, when people often wear their emotions on their sleeves, we've got to be attentive and socially aware. So I just made the statement conflict expands based on the distance between expectations and
Mhm.
reality. I believe that distance widens because we don't talk about it. You just mentioned that. And that's where we need to fill in the gap with lots of good communication.
Mm.
I don't tend to do this well. I tend to think I said it once back in
Yeah.
February, and now they should remember that in June. But I'm so sorry, Tim. That's not going to happen. So, I mean, Slack, email, whatever mechanism you use, we need to keep saying it and keep saying it and keep saying it. And I'll give you a good example. When years ago, I hired a young man right out of college, and he had great intelligence, but unfortunately, he had great expectations. He thought he was going to get lots of time with me.
Mhm.
I'm going to go work for Dr. Elmore, who's written these books, blah, blah, blah. This will be awesome. This will be awesome. I'm going to travel with him all the time. I didn't say that, but he just assumed and expected that it was going to happen. Well,
Mhm.
I could start telling a behavioral change 6 weeks into his job. And he was, like you just said, disengaged, not quite as happy,
Mhm.
just not as zealous. And so I sat down and I finally pulled it out of him that he thought he was going to get this time with me. And I said, think back. Did I tell you that was going to happen? Or did you just assume? And it finally came out that, yeah, he had just assumed it, but it was just as real in his mind as if
The
I would have said it.
assumption. The assumption
So
is a
just
reality.
know this
Yeah.
happens all the time, and we're going to have to shore it up with lots and lots of good detailed
So,
communication.
so perhaps when we see other generations, right,
Yeah,
disengaging, could it be an expectation problem? Potentially, it could be maybe.
yeah,
When we talk about teams,
yeah,
the greatest problems on teams
yeah,
regarding expectations. What do you see and what have you found there? Problems on teams.
yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is expectations are unmet because they remain unspoken. Let me say it again. Expectations remain unmet because they remain unspoken. I don't think we fully realize how often we carry inside of our heads an unspoken expectation that we should have said. In fact, we
Mm.
should have said it day one just to get clarity on this thing. And it doesn't happen. So I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I love this metaphor. And again, it's been so helpful to me as a leader. I call this metaphor, this habitude, dentists and cavities. And here's how it rolls out. If I go to the dentist and the dentist finds a cavity in my mouth, in my tooth, he or she will always say, hey, I found a cavity. Can you stay a little bit longer? I'll fill it right now. Or if you can't, can you come back ASAP? Because that dentist knows if he doesn't fill the cavity right away, something else is going to fill that cavity. In this case, it's bacteria that left a few weeks, that bacteria is going to fill the cavity. I think the minds of people on our team at work have cavities up here in our brains. They're mental cavities that we fill with inaccurate narratives, wrong
Mhm.
information, and that gossip turns into rumors that start getting spread around. And even good people, intelligent people, can start getting scared because of the story they're telling
Mhm.
themselves inside their heads. And now we have inaccurate information spread around the office. Winston Churchill said, uh, rumors spread like wildfire while the truth is still getting its pants on in the morning.
Mm, I
That's
love
that's
that.
kind of what it is. So I just want to warn you, leaders, this is happening in your office, whether you like
Mhm.
it or not, and whether you know it or not. And that's why we've got to make sure we see ourselves as dentists. Leaders are dentists. Your good ones are bad ones, but you're filling those cavities with accurate information, with truth and not lies, if I can talk that bluntly. And this is just going to require us to meet those expectations or clarify that they're never going to happen here.
Yeah. So if we look at what does good look like as a leader, right? What do best leaders do regarding this issue of filling the cavities? What does that look like for a good leader?
Yeah. Well, I remember I had to grow some backbone as a leader, and I'll tell you a story that I think will answer your question. A few years back, we experienced a real division on our team in our office. And by the way, prior to this, we'd enjoy an amazing culture. We love being around each other. We love working together. The productivity just motivated us even more. But it was it was right after the pandemic had sent us all home, and then we had come back. But if you remember, the narrative and culture was very, very divided. The Black Lives Matters marches and so forth, which I think were good, but people had all kinds of ideas about how every company should respond to that. I think
Hmm.
you would agree with that.
Yep. Yep.
Some of our team thought we should completely shift our mission. They wouldn't have said it this way, completely shift our mission to something else. And I thought, well, I want all of um, the social justice issues to be addressed, but it's a byproduct of our mission of training leaders, not our mission. Well, that was very difficult for some of our team, and I knew this was a dicey, scary issue. But I tell you what I had to do, Susan. I had to get up in front of our entire team as the founder. I wasn't even the president, but I was the founder. And I said, let me remind you, this is our mission. And then I said, I want you to know we are very inclusive. It was part of the diversity, equity,
Hmm.
inclusion emphasis that we all were a part of. And by the way, let me add, it was a good and is a good initiative. But here's what I said. I want you to know when you come on this team, we want you to feel very included, that you belong, that your voice is going to be heard, whether you're an intern or a C suite level executive. And I really underscored how included I want. And if they weren't feeling that way, they needed to come to talk to their leader.
Hmm.
But then I said, while we are inclusive, we are also exclusive. And I think the hair on the back of their neck stood up
Yeah.
because
Like
that
what?
was
What?
not a
When you
politically
when you
correct
just
comment.
said we're inclusive, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So here's what I said. We're not for everyone. This mission is very, very focused and narrow. We're about developing a new generation of leaders. And if you
Hmm.
want to be a part of something else, I wish you the best. I'll help you find another job. But you see how that was like, whoa. But it was up to me to clarify this is who we are. And I think leaders really need to do this at least once a year. And people are going to say, I know, it's the mission statement on our wall. Yeah, but we need to talk about it. And I think we
Yeah.
need to embody it and tell stories. So I'm going to stop there because Susan, I'd love to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say.
You
But
know,
that for me, it was growing a backbone. Yeah,
this just happened to me as a coach. I never like telling all the bad things I do, right? But
yeah,
hopefully somebody in the audience can listen to this. But when we coach and we train teams, they have an expectation, right?
yeah, yeah,
And what I have figured out is usually the expectations is a little different than maybe the
yeah,
reality of it is. Meaning,
yes,
when we coach, pure coaching is what? Asking questions,
yeah,
pulling the
yeah,
information out of the other person, right? Well, that's usually people like that, but they want training, they
yeah,
want development, they want consulting. And
yeah,
so getting clear and what I realized is that if I am not clear on what we are doing,
yeah,
there's unmet expectations, right?
yeah,
And so the
yeah,
question becomes, what's your expectation? What do you want? So that we can figure that out so that all the needs are being met. And
yeah,
I find it more and more, and especially in younger generations. I'm seeing
yes,
it more and more.
you're right.
So as the leader, while I know, I need to make sure they know. And
Yeah,
so having
yeah,
that conversation, like you said, this is our focus and not, I think that's highly important for a
it's
leader.
huge. It's huge. Yeah. So let me tell you what we did. We were finding the very same thing you're saying, Susan. The younger team members especially need this as they're getting their sea legs at
Hmm.
work. So we decided we needed to have at the beginning of every week a quick stand-up meeting where we shared what's coming this week, what happened last week. And I mean, this was just a few minutes.
Hmm.
We're all standing up. But then we looked at our wall to the north side of our building. And on that wall was our mission statement.
Hmm.
And we said that statement together. Then our vision statement. This is what we see if we do our mission well. And we said that out loud. Or we would have one person on the team read it out loud. And then, Susan, in between the mission and the vision, we had our core values.
I like that.
And we believed if we embody these core values, we're going to be living out our mission and seeing our vision take place. But I cannot underscore, even though everybody would say, I know what it is. Yeah, but
They
we can
don't.
get,
They don't.
that's right. And we
They
can get
don't.
off track if we don't underscore it.
When
So,
I'm with teams, I figure that out really quick. I'll say, "What's your values? What's your mission, your vision?" And
yes.
people are like looking around and not sure. Or somebody will pull out their name tag and say, "It's on my name tag," and I'm like, your values are your behaviors. It's what you do
Yeah,
every day. And
it's
so
so true.
understanding that. And I'll tell you
Yeah,
that's something my leader does a really good job. We start every team meeting, we read our vision, our mission statement,
yeah,
where people of value that value
yeah,
people that go out and multiply value in others. And then we read our values and someone says, "Let me show you how Tim on the team demonstrated the value
yes,
of teamwork."
yes,
And
yeah,
pulling it back to the vision. So we're level setting the expectation
yeah,
all the
yeah.
time,
On a
all the
regular
time.
basis. I love that, Susan.
All the
That's
time.
exactly what we're talking about here. One
And
last quick
yeah,
thought
yeah,
on
yeah.
this before we move on. Um, I have mentioned three words in episodes gone by that have really helped me also lead through this expectation dilemma. I think there are three levels of requirements that people
Mhm,
have on the inside of their head, and I'm going to use the word preferences, expectations, and requirements.
mm,
So, beginning in the job interview and then ongoing each week, people have inside of them preferences, things they wish would happen, but it's
mhm,
not a deal breaker if it doesn't. They may wish there was a Coke machine in the kitchen, but maybe it's
mhm,
not there. It's not going to end all things. But you might want to find out if that's a preference and you can do it. It's nice to do it. Expectations are one level deeper than
mhm,
preferences. I'm assuming this is going to happen. And this is what we're talking about today. Are there assumptions or expectations we need to talk about?
mhm,
Ask them to tell you. They need permission. But the deepest one is that word requirement. I think sometimes people have, may I use the verb festering a requirements that
mhm,
I demand you do this
mhm.
because this is not, if we're not helping the community with this issue of recycling or whatever it is, I don't know, then you need to know that because I'm telling you, if that festers inside and we don't talk about it, that could be really, really damaging to the culture if you wait 6 months and then it, and like a volcano, erupts
That
because you,
expectation becomes a requirement,
that's
right?
right.
In their
Exactly
brain,
right.
in their
That's
brain.
exactly right. Yeah.
You know, I
So
think
one,
go ahead, Tim,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, Susan, go
No,
ahead. You go.
I was just saying, I think that the thing that I'm picking up so much that this is a multi-generational approach. There's
Yeah.
zero doubt about it.
Yeah.
But as leaders, we've got to set expectations.
Yeah.
I keep going back to this coaching client that I have, and the expectations from the leader was a little different from the
Yeah.
team in the
Yeah.
group coaching setting, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once the expectations were laid out, man, good things start happening.
Yes. Yes.
But
It's
we have to
alignment.
understand those preferences, expectations, requirements of each of our team members.
Yeah. I so agree with that. So one phrase I've tried to live by when it comes to this issue and really many other issues, it's all about getting in front of the issue.
Mm,
Don't wait till all this comes out like a volcano and erupts. So the phrase I've tried to live by, it's another little analogy, is it's better to build a fence at the top of the cliff than a hospital at the bottom. It's better
mm,
to build a fence at the top of the cliff to keep people from falling than a hospital at the bottom once they've fallen. You follow me? So it means we're getting out in front of the issue. And I think
mm,
we'd all agree, to use this analogy, it's much cheaper to build a fence than to build a
mhm,
hospital. But I think we don't get out in front of issues and we're spending millions on hospitals, so to speak, than thousands on
mm,
fences because we react. This episode, listeners, is about getting in front of the issues and shoring off these dilemmas or problems that might be coming because you got out in front. So here's the picture I want to leave you with. You may have heard this little parable. It's kind of a parable, but it's so much about this topic. There were a couple of friends that were fishing in a river, and they'd been waiting and just chatting, no catches yet. But suddenly they both look off to the left as this river is streaming downward toward the right, and they see a baby coming down the river. Well, this is odd. They look around, they don't see a mom or a dad or anything. It's just a baby. So one of the guys jumps in the river, picks up that baby, rescues it. But then the next thing they both look up. Here comes another baby. They go, "Oh my gosh." So the second fisherman jumps in the water. I know it's crazy. The second guy jumps in the water. He picks up the second baby. So now these two guys are standing in the water. They're not fishing. They're rescuing babies. They both got one in their hand. Next thing you know, a third baby starts coming down the river.
What's
Well,
going
at
on
this
here?
point, one of the fishermen hands his baby to the other. So now the other one's got two babies, and he gets out of the water. The other one left in the water with the two babies says, "Hey, I need your help. What are you doing?" And the other guy says something brilliant. He says, "I'm going upstream to figure out what knuckle has thrown these babies into the water." I know, it's stupid.
Let's
But
head
isn't this a
upstream,
picture?
right?
Yeah. I think we need to go upstream and find out what in the world is going on up there and then shore off those problems before they get down there. And this is about expectations.
Man, what a great story to end on. I think that's great. Go upstream, head off
Yep.
the problems right there, set
Yeah.
the expectations, and they are different with the different generations. So, listeners, we hope we've added some value to you. If you want extra value, you can go to maxwellleadership.com/generations at work and download your free playbook. And again, if you are suffering with generational issues within your organization, perhaps you want a webinar, you need a workshop, or maybe you need some individual coaching. This is everywhere. We hear it from most teams. Generational diversity is a big issue. We can help. Just go to maxwellleadership.com/generations at work and be sure to submit questions for Tim, for Dr. Elmore, and myself. We'd love to answer your questions. We want to be a resource for you and add extra value for you. Dr. Elmore, thank you for being here today.
You bet. My pleasure, Susan. Always good to be with you.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on Generations at Work.